give you an overview of what you're going to walk away with. And maybe I should give you just a quick background as to why I wrote this in the first place. Several years ago, I was at a conference, Software Engineering Institute, and being a specialist in measurement and process, I saw the topic was unintended consequences, and I thought, oh, cool, this is good, because I was doing a lot of thinking about that, and it was never addressed in any of the literature. So I went to it, and I sat and watched, and I was happy that they dealt with one very obvious problem, which will be addressed here, but I was dismayed that there was so much that wasn't said, and I thought, well, I need to, I guess, get on the stick and get this done. This is, it covers a lot more material than I've seen even since, and I have no problem with other people picking up some of the messages of this. But it's a cross-disciplinary study, bringing in the background of psychology along with my long experience as a software engineer and a professional in IT. And maybe that's one of the reasons why some of these things did not appear before. So that said, you're going to walk away with an understanding of the relationships between measurement, behavior, practices, and results. And I will take some time to offer definitions for the purpose of this presentation of those terms as used. You're going to have added knowledge of the cause and effect nature of measurement. You will actually get some techniques that are from the field of psychology that minimize unintended consequences and maximize, one hopes, your intended results. And you all should be able to also come away with an understanding of what motivates and demotivates people. All right, now here is the mantra that I use in measurement a lot. The relationship between measurement and behavior is measurement changes behavior. The problem is that people are going to change behavior in unintended, surprising, and even negative ways, sometimes even contradictory. The challenge you're going to face is to measure, specifically design your measurements in such a way as to motivate good behavioral choices. All right, so I set up a causal continuum that I'll make some reference to throughout the presentation. This isn't something that there's going to be a test on, but it does help to get yourself positioned for understanding why things are happening and how to make them happen in an appropriate way. It shows that there are, it oversimplifies to a certain degree the cause and effect relationships that drive results and goals. So first of all, just for definition purposes, some of these are from dictionaries, some of them are just arbitrary choices. A value is a principle, a standard, or a quality considered worthwhile or desirable. Now, this will seem pretty obvious, but at least we have to have level setting of terms before we move forward using them. A motive is an emotion, a desire, physiological need, or a similar impulse that acts as an incitement to action. And a behavior, and this is where it gets really key. These are terms we're going to be using a lot throughout the presentation. An observable action performed by an individual. Now, I absolutely understand that other people are going to use this term differently, but for the purposes of the messages in this presentation, I'm going to choose to limit the term to this definition. Behavior is an observable action performed by an individual. Practice, I'm going to limit to mean a habitual behavior performed by an individual or a group. Results are observable, relatively enduring achievements. And goals are, of course, high-level fundamental characteristics that define success. Any questions on those terms at this point? Hearing none, I'll move forward. All right. A couple of supporting concepts are those of consequences. There are good consequences and bad consequences for certain things that people choose. This is a common mistake made in managing people. It's particularly important in understanding behavioral psychology. Giving an instruction or an order does not in itself motivate unless a meaningful consequence is expected for compliance or noncompliance. is even true in the military, where consequences are spelled out specifically, and giving an order is expected to result in compliance. In most of the rest of the world, there is still the same problem. But unless there is a meaningful consequence, whether good or bad, expected for complying or not complying with the instruction, just saying you need to do this will not motivate. A consequence is meaningful if, and these are key, either the person who is going to do the action receives what that person wants or fears, in which case it's a negative consequence, or else what one wants or fears is withheld as a result of doing whatever the action is. And the intensity, of course, of that want or fear will affect the ability of the consequence to motivate. It's a little more complicated than that, too, because there are going to be competing motivations out there. And this is, at this point, this statement that I make here, I do depart from standard scientific behavioral psychology. I got a degree in psychology, and it's the one area where I disagree. That is, I say a person can grant one's own consequences. They can be internal, and I believe there are other psychologists who will agree with that, but classic behavioral psychology says that we really don't have these choices. All right. There are risks and benefits of measuring results. Now, one of the things that is just true about the measurement world is that goals are often expressed in terms of results, and there's no getting away from this. You need to measure results in almost any endeavor, and many times the major goals are expressed in terms of those results. The problem is that to get to that result, there can be many paths for an individual. Some of these paths, the things that are done along the way to trying to achieve the goal, especially the measured goal, it may defeat other goals, and sometimes you can actually achieve the measure that was set up to somehow represent achievement of the goal, and yet not achieve truly the spirit of the goal. The challenge here for all of us who are involved in measurement, either using them or designing them, is to increase the motivation for people who are subject to this management technique, measurement. Increase the motivation to choose desirable paths and decrease the motivation to choose undesirable paths. Fairly simple. Now, here are some techniques. We're not going to go into detail. These are fairly straightforward, and we'll get into some more interesting techniques later. But before you, when you're coming up with a measure or with an indicator or a key process indicator or whatever it is, you need to brainstorm likely paths to results, good and bad. Play a devil's advocate. Okay, how can this go wrong? Deliberately or accidentally, how could this go wrong? And then think backwards. Start with practices, go back through behaviors, motives to the values. And if you're dealing with a cross-cultural international team, you're going to have to bring in people who really understand the different cultures that are at play, because motives and values are strongly differ across cultures, and a lot of assumptions can be made that are incorrect if we base our own culture's values, based our assumptions on our own culture's values. All right. First thing to do is identify the practices known to achieve good or bad results. This is usually not very hard. Most of the professionals in the area, and subject matter experts, will say, yeah, here's what you should do in this field. Now, this is a question that when I'm dealing with clients on measurement, I ask this almost every time, right up front, when I'm dealing usually with the high-end stakeholders. I say in one form or another, and I usually start with the negative, the second one is positive. What